If I told you that Pontius Pilate regretted his role in Jesus' death long after the crucifixion, what would you say? Did you know that Pilate wrote a letter to the Roman Emperor Tiberius concerning Jesus? In the letter, Pilate discusses Jesus' miracles, his trial, his crucifixion, and wait for it, his resurrection. What exactly does the letter say? Pontius Pilate discussing Jesus. What did he say to the Roman emperor about the resurrection of the Son of God? Did you know that the letter has some pretty amazing details about Jesus' appearance that aren't even in the Gospels? This is what this episode is about, discussing the content of this letter and what it says about Jesus. Now I want you to judge for yourself as let's take a look at some parts of the letter that Pontius Pilate wrote to Caesar about Jesus Christ. Pontius Pilate to Tiberius Caesar, Emperor. He brought people back from the dead and cured all kinds of diseases. He was a tall, handsome man with a very respectful look. People loved and feared him at the same time. His hair was chestnut-colored, straight on top and curly on the bottom. It hung down to his shoulders. In the middle of his head, there was a line where his hair was divided. Hair. Like the Nazarites. His forehead is plain and very delicate. His face is without spot or wrinkle and looks lovely. His nose and mouth are so formed that nothing can be reprehended. His beard is thickish in color like his hair. Not very long, but forked. His look is innocent and mature. His eyes are gray, clear and quick. He is terrible in reproving. He was always very polite and fair, and he was a great conversationalist. He was serious, but he never seemed angry. Many people saw him cry, but nobody ever saw him laugh. He was very handsome, and his hands and arms were very attractive. He was always very calm and wise, and he was very modest. He was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. The chief priest was jealous and wanted to kill him. He asked me to speak with him. Judas Iscariot was there too. Judas betrayed him and took him to me. I asked him about the accusations against him. He answered them with no reluctance. He was sometimes very eloquent. I asked him what religion he was, and he said, "O Caesar, I am a king, but my kingdom is not of this world." I then asked him if he were a god, and he said, "You're right. I am the truth and the life. I am the good shepherd. I am the door." He was crucified according to their law. In that very hour, there was darkness over all the world. The sun was darkened at midday, the stars appeared in their brightness, and the moon, as if turned into blood, failed in her light. The universe was thus darkened. The dead that lay in their graves rose and appeared unto many. When my mind was troubled, so I took a moment to wash my hands of the blood of this just person, the likes of whom had never been before. As you read this letter, part of the report, one thing is clear: Pilate went to great lengths to describe Jesus. Why? The answer is simple. At the time, there were no image-capturing devices. So when describing someone important, you pay a lot of attention to their physical attributes. This is so that the reader can recognize Jesus in person or in other reports. The letter continues with a description of recent events in the province. I thought I would give the details as they have occurred. As I should not be, I'm surprised if they change the destiny of our nation in the future. It seems like the gods have stopped being on our side. I'm almost ready to say that I made a mistake succeeding Valerius Gratus in the government of Judea. Of all the conquered cities, Jerusalem was the most difficult to govern. The people were so turbulent that I was living in fear of an uprising. To put it down, I had just one centurion and a few soldiers. I asked the prefect of Syria for reinforcements. He told me he didn't have enough troops to defend his own province. I had this insatiable desire to conquer and expand our empire beyond the limits of our defenses. I fear that Pontius Pilate said that destroying our noble empire was the means to an end. Pause and think about what this means. Pontius Pilate. He was pretty frustrated with governing Judea. He thought Jerusalem was especially tough to govern because of the people there. This is the context for Pilate's next account of the tricky situation he inherited. Pilate's account shows that the military resources weren't enough to keep order in Jerusalem. Despite the city's potential for unrest, Pilate had only a single centurion and a handful of soldiers. This shortage of troops shows how precarious Roman control in the region really was and how challenging it was to put down potential uprisings. Pilate's concerns about overextending and the inadequacy of military resources affected his decision. Let's talk about the process, including how Pilate handled Jesus' trial and crucifixion. Now, let's get back to Pilate's letter. My concerns were quickly put to rest. Jesus of Nazareth spoke more like a friend of the Romans than of the Jews. One day, I saw a young man in the middle of a large crowd in the area of Siloam. He was calmly addressing the group, leaning against a tree. I was told it was Jesus, which made sense because he stood out so much from the others. He had golden-colored hair and beard, which gave him a celestial look. He seemed to be about 30 years old. He had the sweetest, most serene countenance. He looked so different from his hearers, who had black beards and tan complexions. Okay, let's stop to comment on this as well because I believe this is the only recorded explanation of Jesus' appearance in all historical documents. This particular interest is the description of him as having golden-colored hair and a beard. In the earlier version of the letter, we read that Jesus had chestnut-colored hair. Same thing. However, including this detail raises questions about its authenticity. Was it added by later scribes copying the document? Or did Jesus have lighter hair and a beard compared to his contemporaries? Some believe this is an addition. This detail was added by those who copied this document over the years, but we don't know for sure. It's certainly intriguing. Personally, it does matter. Now, back to the Pilate report. I didn't want to interrupt him, so I continued my walk but signaled to my secretary to join the group and listen. My secretary's name was Manlius. Manlius was the grandson of the chief of the conspirators who encamped in Etruria, awaiting Catalan. He was an ancient inhabitant of Judea and well acquainted with the Hebrew language. He was devoted to me and worthy of my confidence. When I entered the praetorium, I found Manlius, who told me what Jesus had said. At Siloam, I've never heard anything in the Bible or in the works of philosophers that compares to Jesus' maxims. One of the rebellious Jews in Jerusalem asked Jesus if it was lawful to give tribute to Caesar. Jesus replied, "Render unto Caesar the things which belong to Caesar and unto God the things that are God's." I gave the Nazarenes so much liberty because of the wisdom of this saying. I could have had him arrested and exiled to Pontus, but that would have been contrary to the justice that has always characterized the Romans. The man was neither seditious nor rebellious. I gave him my protection, maybe even without realizing it. He was free to act, speak, and assemble and address the people. He could even choose disciples without any praetorian interference. But this unlimited freedom granted to Jesus upset the Jews, not the poor but the rich and powerful. It's true that Jesus was tough on the latter, and this was a political reason, in my opinion, not to control the liberty of the Nazarene. He called the scribes and Pharisees a race of vipers and said they resembled painted sepulchres. At other times, he would sneer at the proud alms of the publican, telling him that the mite of the poor widow is more precious in the sight of God. New complaints were made at the praetorium every day against Jesus' insolence. I was even informed that some misfortune would befall him. That it would not be the first time that Jerusalem had stoned those who called themselves prophets. And that if the praetorium refused justice, and I was told that an appeal would be made to Caesar. However, my conduct was approved by the Senate, and I was promised a reinforcement after the termination of the Parthian War. I was too weak to suppress this addition, so I decided to adopt a measure that promised to establish the tranquility of the city without subjecting the praetorium to humiliating concession. I hope you've been listening, dear viewers. Pilate knew all about Jesus for a long time, but he let him preach and move around freely because he didn't see any rebelliousness in him. Despite pressure from Jewish religious leaders, he didn't find any reason to prosecute Jesus. That was until it became convenient for him. He only gave in when he feared an uprising from the Jews and knew he didn't have the military resources to assert control. Pilate gave Jesus up for the peace of Jerusalem. That seems pretty poignant, doesn't it? Especially given what we know of Jesus' mission. In any case, Pilate hesitated to crucify Jesus, opting instead to hand him over to quell the political unrest of the time and prevent potential uprisings. Clearly, Pilate was an opportunist. He only cared for his power and authority. He may have washed his hands many times, but the blood of the innocent will linger forever. On the bright side, though, he left us a message. Now we know from a documentary that Jesus indeed lived and was crucified. Before we wrap up, let's look at one more piece of evidence about Jesus from Pilate. Let's take a look at what's known as the Pilate stone. What does it say? The Pilate stone is an ancient artifact discovered near Caesarea Maritima in Israel. It is a dedicatory inscription on a limestone block that provides archaeological evidence of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, who is mentioned in the New Testament accounts of Jesus' trial and crucifixion. We've been reading Pilate's letter to Caesar, but what proof is there that Pilate existed? Well, this artifact, the Pilate stone, proves that Pontius Pilate was real and lived during Jesus' time. The inscription on the Pilate stone reads, "To the divine Augusti, this Tiberius, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea." Roman leaders often saw themselves as gods. This is why it's called the Pilate stone. Today, we know that Caesarea Maritima is located along the Mediterranean coast of Israel. It was a significant ancient city and administrative center during Roman times. The Pilate stone was found and reused in the staircase leading up to a theater at the site. Archaeologists identified it because of the Latin inscription carved into the limestone block. In conclusion, the letter of Pilate and the stone of Pilate together show that Pontius Pilate existed and prove the story about Jesus' ministry and crucifixion. They also tell us more about Jesus' appearance than we read in the Bible. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel. God bless you. Amen.